My name's Jack Mitchell, and I'll be straight with you. I'm a genius. No kidding, I really am. My IQ is somewhere around 160, so I've earned that title. Back in grade school, I was the kid everyone knew was the smartest. By the time I was in 10th grade, I was already knocking out college courses. I graduated college at 19 and dove straight into a master's program in computer science. Once I finished my master's, a major company recruited me, one that essentially keeps everything in the world running. Let me break it down for you. When you woke up this morning and turned on the bathroom light, that's me. When you washed your face, I made that happen too. And when you paid for that $10 coffee with your credit card, yeah, that's me again. My job? I safeguard everything that keeps society functioning smoothly. Your personal info, the electric grid, and all the systems we rely on. I make sure the bad guys can't mess with any of it. But here's the kicker. All that focus on work, all those years of studying and sacrificing, came at a cost, my love life. I didn't even lose my virginity until I was 20. My first time? Well, it was more of a scientific experiment than anything else. We both climaxed, so we called it a success. And that was the end of it. It wasn't until I got my first big bonus and landed a six-figure salary that I thought, hey, maybe I should try my luck with women. I went all in $3,000 suit, a $155,000 Rolex, and a $400,000 Maserati. I'm telling you, that bonus was life-changing. Believe it or not, my first couple of outings were total flops. But then one night, I parked the car outside a bar, walked in, and grabbed a stool. I ordered whiskey straight. I hated the taste, but I knew it would last me all night. I kept tipping the bartender to hold my spot. Then, this gorgeous blonde sits down next to me and asks if I'll buy her a drink. She starts talking, and I just listen for about an hour. I try to say as little as possible. I didn't want her to catch on to how shy I am. Finally, she says she has to leave, but before she goes, she asks me to dinner on Saturday. She gives me her number and address, and that was it. I was off and running. Saturday night, I show up with flowers. She thanks me, puts them in a vase, and we head to the restaurant. She's all over my Maserati, asking a million questions about it. The dinner was at a super fancy, romantic spot. Expensive, too. Afterward, we just drove around town, killing time. When we got back to her place, I walked her to the door. She kissed me on the cheek, and I was on cloud nine. A week later, she asked me out again. 2 weeks after that, on our third date, she invited me inside. What followed was the full boyfriend experience. Intimacy, affection, all of it. She even called me a stud. For the next 6 months, everything was going great. Then one night, over a cold turkey sandwich, she told me I was going to be a father. I was stunned, shocked even. I'll explain why in a bit. I asked her what she wanted to do about it. She said her religion didn't allow abortion, so she was going to have the baby. I told her I'd do the right thing and marry her, if that's what she wanted. She agreed, and 2 days later, we were on a plane to Las Vegas. We got married at the Chapel of Love, celebrated at the MGM, and then came home. I moved her out of her apartment and into my house. Well, mansion is more like it. 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, a 4-car garage, a swimming pool, tennis courts, a hot tub, a gym in the basement that I've never used, and a home theater with stadium seating for 30, also never used. She seemed happy, quit her job to prepare for the baby, and I thought about nothing but the future. Every day, I expected to come home and find her crying, worried about having a miscarriage. What she didn't know was that I'm sterile. I've been that way for years. My mom didn't believe in childhood vaccinations, and I ended up with the mumps when I was younger. After that, I couldn't have kids. I never told her, and I had no intention of ever doing so. Having kids was always something I dreamed of. I'm an only child, and both of my parents were only children, so I don't have any family left. When I found out we were having twins, I was over the moon. I was happier than I'd ever been. The babies were born, twin boys, both with black hair and blue eyes, just like me. Sure, they had their mom's nose, but that didn't matter. I accepted them as my sons, even though I knew the truth. But then, 2 months after they were born, Emily changed. She became distant, and we went through 3 nannies. She was impossible to live with. But then something shifted. She started laughing again, playing with the kids. She even started going out with her old friends a couple of nights a week. I didn't mind, I accepted it. We were intimate again a few times a week. I enjoyed spending time with my sons. Then one afternoon, things took a strange turn. One of Emily's old friends came up to me at lunch. She asked how the twins were doing and how Emily was. After some casual chit-chat, she said something strange: "Tell Emily to give me a call sometime. I haven't seen that girl in ages." That hit me wrong. Emily had just gone out for drinks with her the night before. That's when I decided to act. I installed a GPS tracker on her car and phone, plus cameras around the house, in case she decided to bring someone home. The next time she went out for drinks, I tracked her to a motel on the outskirts of town. I waited in the car with the twins in their baby seats, watching as her car pulled up next to another car, one that had the same state plates as mine. I snapped pictures of the cars and their plates, then headed home. When Emily came back, she went straight to the shower. She kissed me on the cheek, told me she was tired, and went to bed. The next day, I sent Mr. Ethan Harris a set of photos. One of his car parked at the Super 8 motel, and another of Emily's car parked right next to it. The note said, "The car next to his belongs to Emily Mitchell." The fallout was quick. Mrs. Harris showed up at our house and slapped Emily hard across the face. I had rushed home after receiving the same photos in my email. I saw the slap and confronted Emily. She didn't deny it. She apologized, saying it was a fling caused by her depression, and promised it wouldn't happen again. She cried. I cried. I forgave her, but made it clear, if it happened again, I would divorce her and take the kids. She promised it wouldn't, and for a while, things went back to normal. But I never removed the GPS trackers or the cameras. From Emily's perspective, though, things were a little different. She had no idea how I and Ethan's wife had found out about the affair. She was clueless, really. Despite all the evidence, she thought the law would always be on her side. She figured she could sleep with half the town and still walk away with the kids, the house, and a fat alimony check. After all, I had no real family left, and she never got a straight answer from me about my work. 6 months after that slap, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years, Jake Anderson. He was my first, I was a junior in high school, and he was a senior on the basketball team. After I moved away, we lost touch, but I'd heard from friends that he'd gotten into some legal trouble before disappearing. Now here he was standing right in front of me. He looked at me, and I knew he remembered me. Certainly, here's the rewritten version of the text with the requested changes, keeping the tone conversational and making the character dynamics clearer, as well as switching out the names to more common American ones. I also cleaned up a bit for clarity and flow. I kissed his lips right there in the Winn-Dixie, right in the middle of the bread aisle. We chatted for a few minutes, exchanged phone numbers, and I told him I was married, but I really wanted us to pick things back up. He understood completely. I said I'd call him when I could arrange a time, and he said he wasn't seeing anyone and wasn't married. He was living in a rented house in a nice neighborhood. I knew the subdivision. This is better than a hotel, I thought. He also told me he worked as a warehouse manager, but was off on Wednesdays and Thursdays since he worked on the weekends. I thought that was a little odd, but didn't ask about it. He had on a work shirt with James written on it where his name should have been, and I figured I'd ask about that later. I had to leave, though. The nanny got off at 3 p.m., and I had to start dinner for Robert. When I got home that day, there was a nice pot roast simmering in the kitchen. Sue was acting a little too friendly, and it made me suspicious. I checked the GPS on her phone and car. Nothing unusual since her last affair. She'd been acting normal, and we'd been intimate 3 or 4 times a week, doing everything we used to. But she was so off that day that I decided to keep a closer eye on her. I normally checked her once a week, but now I was going to do it more often. After dinner, I borrowed her phone and installed a new app. When her phone rang, I could listen in if I wanted, or I could listen to her outgoing calls. I could even turn her phone on as a listening device when she wasn't around. It worked up to about 15 feet. Technology is amazing these days. I waited until Tuesday to call Jamal. Let me tell you something. I love my husband, but not in the way you think. Look, I was raised in a blue-collar household. We were always a little short on money, but my parents made it work. I swore to myself I was going to do better in life. The night I saw Robert pull up in that Maserati and sit at the bar showing off his Rolex, I knew I had to go after him. That shy, introverted guy was like putty in my hands. Within 6 months, I was pregnant and married. He was so excited about the kids. It tied me to him and that big paycheck of his forever. But I was going to have my fun with Jamal. Robert would never know. And if I played my cards right, I could keep it all, my family, my lifestyle, the whole thing. Wednesday, I pulled into Jamal's garage and went into his house through the back. No one knew I was here. No pictures this time. How would I describe it? Amazing. I got off just thinking about how I was pulling one over on my genius husband. He'd never know. I even told Jamal he was better than Robert. But most of what I said was just in the heat of the moment. I didn't mean it. I hadn't thought about Jamal in years. After he finished, I went to the bathroom to clean up. Jamal wanted me to stay, but I couldn't. I didn't want to raise suspicions with Robert. I promised I'd be back tomorrow. We had started going to church, and they had a Mother's Day off program. I could drop the kids off at 9 a.m. and pick them up at 3 p.m. We could spend the day together. Jamal was fine with that, so we made it a date for the next day. I went home that night, feeling happy. I was back in control. A little guilty, sure, but in bed that night, I let Robert do his thing. She thinks she got away with it today. Maybe I missed the first part, but I was listening when she was talking to her lover, telling him how much she missed him, how he was the best. That hit me hard. I thought we'd gotten past all that. I had found out the house was rented to James Lincoln. Pulled up his driver's license. He was black. He had a car registered in his name, and he worked as a forklift driver in a warehouse here in town. How did she meet him? Why does she keep calling him Jamal? I need more time to figure him out and come up with a plan to get him out of our lives. Just like I did with that Stewart character. Want to know my story? Here it is. I was a high school basketball player, not good enough for a scholarship, but good enough to make a name for myself. My senior year, I met Sue. We started dating. I remember the night we hooked up, back seat of my grandmother's Buick. Of course it was good. We dated for about 6 months, then she moved away. I never heard from her again. I graduated, but there were no offers to play college ball. No job prospects for a poor black kid who barely graduated. So I did what a lot of guys like me do. I started selling drugs. Money started coming in fast. My grandmother didn't approve, but I couldn't find another way out. I moved up in the organization, became one of the Mexican boss's favorites. I started managing some of the guys working the corners. One night, me and this Mexican caught one of my guys stealing from us. To set an example, I took him into an alley and capped him. At first, I thought about ditching the gun in the river, but then I had an idea. The Mexican liked to practice shooting, so I took him to a gun range. As we were finishing up, I joked about my pistol not shooting straight. He grabbed it, fired a few rounds, and handed it back to me, saying, "It's not the pistol, it's the pistolero." Things went well for almost 2 years. I was rising in the Rio Bravo cartel, rolling in money. I was moving 10 kilos of heroin when I got caught. A flat tire and a cop who pulled over to help. I tried to tell him I didn't need help, but he opened the trunk. A few more cop cars showed up. They were feds, and before I knew it, I was booked. 2 days later, my lawyer told me they were offering me 25 years, maybe 15 with good behavior. I took the deal. But back in my cell, I told the guard I wanted to talk to the DEA agent who busted me. I made a deal. I gave them information on a guy named Jose Gomez, a street dealer. I had the gun with his prints on it to prove it. I wanted witness protection and no jail time. In the end, Jose was convicted, and I was moved to another city. They gave me $100,000 for my testimony, and I rented an apartment, started a new life. I learned to drive a forklift, and for 2 years I loaded trucks. Then one day, I ran into a guy I used to play basketball with, Robert. He told me about Sue, how they got married. We agreed to meet up, relive old times. After he left, I called my contact in the marshal's office, and I was moved that night. I stayed in a hotel for a few days while I studied my new identity. Once I had it down, I started job hunting. I liked driving forklifts, and it wasn't hard to get work. One day, on my day off, I went to the grocery store. That's when I saw Sue. I hadn't thought about her in years, but after talking to her, I knew I made a mistake. I should have called the marshals, but I didn't want to move again. Besides, according to Sue, she had just as much to lose as I did. She didn't want to give up her lifestyle, so if we kept things quiet, nobody would know. The first time was quick. She had to get back to Robert. But she promised she'd come back the next day, and we could spend more time together. I dropped the twins off at the church daycare and raced to Jamal's place. I had until 2:30 p.m., and planned on using every minute of it. The garage door was already open when I pulled in, and I parked my car in a spot no one could see. I was so naughty. No one knew I was here, my car was hidden, and I had 5 hours to be with Jamal. I was in heaven. I set my phone on his bedside table, just in case there was an emergency with the kids or Robert. Not that I expected a call, but you never know. Better safe than sorry. I heard it all today. Her begging him, pleading with him not to stop, asking him to do it harder, and describing how he touched her in places I never could. At one point, she screamed, "Jamal, you're the best I've ever had." That's when I hit pay dirt. Jamal. His last name must be James Lincoln. I pulled up his driver's license. That was the guy. I needed to do some digging on this James Lincoln. Wait a second. Jamal? Why was she calling him that? This is the same guy who's been hiding in plain sight. I got the info I needed. Jamal wasn't just some guy. This man is in the Federal Witness Protection Program. I found it in the dark web. There's a reward on his head from the Rio Bravo cartel. They don't play around when it comes to rats. This changes everything. I could use this. I could use him. I walked in, trying to act normal, but Robert was already there. This wasn't the usual routine. Normally, I wouldn't expect him home until around 5, but here he was sitting at the table. "Sit down," he said, his voice cold. Something was off. I sat down, my heart racing. "I got a phone call today." "From your phone," he said, looking at me sharply. I froze. "My phone?" "I recorded the message," he added, pressing play. And there it was, the recording. Her voice, begging, screaming. "Harder, God, yes, right there, don't stop." My heart sank. It was me talking to Jamal. I had left the phone on the bedside table, and somehow Robert had gotten access to it. I reached over and hit the stop button. I didn't know what to say. I had to think fast. I took the phone out of my purse and laid it on the table. How the hell could I explain this? Robert stared at me with that intense look of his. "Remember what I told you would happen if I ever caught you cheating again?" I looked at him. There it was, the same shy, insecure guy I had married. I could see the hurt, the rage, but also his desperation to keep the life we built. He was like putty in my hands if I played my cards right. I knew exactly what to say. "Robert, stop. You're not going to divorce me," I said, my voice calm and steady. "You'd lose everything. We live in a no-fault state. Adultery doesn't matter. The boys and I would get the house. You pay all our expenses, child support, alimony, everything. And since you make a fortune, trust me, the alimony would be substantial." He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. "And listen to this," I continued. "I could have Jamal move in here with me. Help me raise your kids. And there's nothing you could do about it. So think before you make the greatest mistake of your life." Robert stared at me. "Who's Jamal?" I could see the questions flooding his mind. "Jamal is my old high school boyfriend," I said, my voice steady. "My first. I met him last week at the grocery store, and yesterday was the first time we got together. But don't worry, Robert. I didn't come home and give you sloppy seconds. This is just a phase. His fascination with me will pass. He's a selfish lover. In 2 or 3 months, I'll be done with him, and we'll get back to raising the kids together." I smiled, waiting for his response. "How about it?" I asked. "I get to be with you every time you go to Jamal's. That's what I'm proposing." He was quiet for a moment, thinking. Finally, he spoke. "Okay, but I want you to promise me some things. I'll trust you if you keep your word." I didn't trust her, but I knew she was right. She had the upper hand. "For now." "What things?" I asked. "First, you'll never fall in love with this guy," she said. "And you won't leave me for him. Jamal works in a warehouse. No way I'm running off with that working-class stiff. Second, you'll never bring him to our house. This place is ours, and the kids are ours. No one else." "I promise," she replied quickly. "Third, I don't want Jamal to know I know about him. That's our little secret. Something for you and me to share while I know he's with you. That's easy. I promise. He'll never know. Fourth, no calling him from the house phone. If you want to talk to him, go outside on the deck and use your cell. Phoenix, I haven't called him much. I've only confirmed when he'll be free, and he's never called me. It's simple." She took a breath, then added, "This isn't about love, Robert. It's just intimacy for both of us. That's why it won't last. It's just about sex. I sat back, feeling my stomach turn. She was playing me. She thought she had all the answers, but I was already making plans. I lied and told her I had to work on Saturday and Sunday. The truth was I was getting everything in order, erasing my tracks in the dark web, searching for more on Jamal, on James Lincoln. I also set up a meeting with an attorney in a different city, Jose Gomez's attorney. He was filing an appeal for Gomez. I knew where a key witness was located. I had a video he might be interested in, but there was a price, $500,000. On Sunday night, I played the too tired for intimacy card. Sue thought I was sulking. Little did she know I was making moves. By Tuesday morning, I was already in the air. I had a 2-hour flight to meet with Jose Gomez's attorney. I told Sue I had an important meeting and wouldn't be home until late. When I walked into his office, the name on the door reads Stephen Judd, Esquire. He had an ego the size of Texas. He welcomed me in and we got right to it. I have information that could help with the appeal for the Jose Gomez case, I said, sliding a thumb drive across the desk. He took the drive and plugged it into his computer. After a few minutes, he asked, "Where did you get this?" I didn't flinch. That particular gun range stores all its video in the cloud. I have connections. He raised an eyebrow. "You're interested in doing business?" "I am," I said. "But there's more. You're also looking for a witness." "I know who you mean," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But I want some more details." "Wait here. I'll confer with my associate." I nodded, knowing exactly how this was going to go. 20 minutes later, the door opened, and a beautiful Mexican woman walked in. She must have come in through another entrance. She introduced herself as Maria and suggested we go to lunch. I was a little stunned, still caught off guard by her beauty. This was bad, but I was too deep into this to back out. Maria led me to a black Lincoln Town car parked in the garage. It had blacked-out windows and leather seats. It screamed mafia. When the chauffeur opened the door, Maria slid in and patted the seat beside her. "Are you coming?" "In for a penny, in for a pound," I thought. I slid in next to her, my mind racing. She was beautiful, long, dark hair, and almost black eyes. I was speechless. This woman was royalty in her own world. "Don't worry," she said, her voice smooth like velvet. "We'll get what you need. Come with me." Maria's beauty was overwhelming. I couldn't take my eyes off her. The silence was starting to feel awkward, so I tried to speak, but before I could, she gently took my hand and looked me square in the eyes. "Wait until we get to the restaurant," she said softly. "There, we'll have more privacy." I nodded. I could barely focus on anything else except how incredible she looked. Her stockinged legs, the cleavage teasing from her blouse. At the restaurant, we were greeted like royalty. It was obvious Maria was no stranger here. They showed us to a private dining room, and just before the door closed behind us, I noticed the waiter heading toward a credenza near the door. With a flick of his hand, he turned on a jamming device. A grin spread across my face. This conversation was about to get interesting. Maria's gaze shifted to me. "Now, Robert, we can talk. Do you know where Jamal Atkins is?" "Yes," I replied, my throat tight. I didn't like where this was headed. "You know we have a $500,000 reward for his whereabouts," Maria continued, her tone calm, but filled with underlying menace. "Give me his location, and I'll arrange the payment." I shook my head slightly, trying to process the weight of her words. "How much do you want for the thumb drive?" she asked next. "I'm not interested in money," I responded, pushing the drive away from me. "The thumb drive's free. I just happened to cross it while researching Jamal. A good trial attorney or the feds could have found it 2 years ago and avoided all this." I paused, taking a sip of my beer. The feds wanted to convict Jose, but they could never get proof on a drug charge. They got so excited when Jamal offered evidence that they stopped investigating further. Maria seemed to think for a moment, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of her glass. "I hope it helps," she said almost indifferently. "But as for the money, about the location of this rat, I need something else." I swallowed hard, realizing there was no easy way out. "Just tell me. I can make a lot of things happen." Just then, the waiter arrived with a feast: enchiladas, fajitas, refried beans, guacamole, tacos, and tortillas. 2 Dos XX beers were placed before us. I needed a moment to process everything, so I tried to focus on the food as Maria spoke. "Let's eat while you tell me everything, Robert," she said, her voice smooth, almost reassuring. We dug into the best Mexican food I'd ever had. Between bites, I poured out my life story, everything from my childhood to my marriage with Sue. I explained the pain of realizing my twins weren't biologically mine because I was sterile. Maria listened intently, never interrupting. When I reached the part about Sue's affairs, she only muttered a soft pah. As I continued, I could see Maria's expression shift slightly. She wasn't laughing at my pain. She understood something more profound. "I know the feeling of wanting a family, but not being able to have one," she said softly. She then told me her own story. She had been diagnosed with ovarian cysts at 15, and by the time she was 18, had to undergo surgery, making it impossible for her to have children. It was a deep pain, one I hadn't expected to hear about. I took a deep breath before getting to the part one dreaded. "When you take Jamal, take her too," I said, my voice heavy with regret and bitterness. "If you do that for me, I'll consider us even." Maria didn't flinch. "Are you sure? What about your kids?" "My boys are only 3, I replied, my voice tight. "They won't remember her. I'll hire a live-in nanny, and in a month, they'll forget about their lying, cheating mother." She considered my words, her gaze unwavering. "So, when is the next time they'll be together?" "Tomorrow morning," I replied, my voice strained. "Then kiss your wife goodbye forever in the morning," she said with a chilling finality. "So soon?" I asked, stunned. "Don't you need time to plan? I mean, you have less than 24 hours. Maria stopped me. "We let him get away 3 months ago by waiting for the weekend. We won't make that mistake again." She looked at me, her eyes gleaming with a cold, calculating intensity. "Give me his address." I finished my second beer, and we walked out of the restaurant. As we reached the curb, she signaled for a taxi. I opened the door and started to get in, but she stopped me. I turned to look at her. Her eyes were like deep pools of mystery. Maria kissed me on the cheek, whispering, "Thank you," in my ear. As the taxi pulled away, I watched her slide into the back of the black Lincoln Town car. I doubted I'd ever see her again. It was Wednesday afternoon, and I was in the bunker, the place where I take care of everything. My secretary buzzed me, informing me I had visitors waiting in the lobby. I took the elevator up and entered my office through the side door. I buzzed her back to show them in. "Mr. Shaw," one of the men said as they entered. "I'm Detective Jones, and this is my partner, Joe Friday." We shook hands, and I invited them to sit. "Mr. Shaw, I'll get right to the point. Do you know where your wife is?" My heart skipped a beat. This morning, she told me she was going shopping at the mall after the nanny arrived, then to the grocery store, and then home. "Why?" The detective handed me a photo. My stomach dropped. "Oh my God! Yes, that's her." "What happened?" "We're not really sure," Detective Jones said. "We dispatched a car to investigate shots fired at the residence of James Lincoln. We found your wife dead. Do you know a James Lincoln?" "James Lincoln?" I repeated, confused. "No, I don't. Who is he?" Jones looked at me carefully. "James Lincoln is Jamal Atkins, Robert. He's in witness protection. We're working 2 theories. One is that the Rio Bravo cartel found out about him and blamed your wife, so they shot her. The other theory is that he wanted to run off with her, but she refused and he shot her anyway." My mind raced, but I couldn't form a coherent thought. "We know he shot her," Detective Friday added. "We found the weapon, a .45 automatic, with his fingerprints on it. I could barely breathe. But why was she with him? How long has this been going on?" "We don't know, but we don't think it's been long," Jones said. "We know he's only been in town for a couple of months. At first, we thought you might have something to do with it, but the deeper we got, the more it looked like it was related to his history with the cartel." I was numb, lost in a sea of emotions. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Shaw," Jones said, his voice softer now. "But we'll keep you informed. We're doing everything we can to get justice for your wife." The detectives left, but their words echoed in my head. I felt like my world was crumbling. The only thing I could focus on was getting my boys to safety and putting this whole mess behind me. The phone rang again, but this time I didn't answer. I wasn't ready for what might come next. The next day, after a long stretch of trying to digest everything, I got a knock at the door. It was a car, a black Lincoln Town car, of course. When I opened the door, there was Maria, and behind her, Lou carrying 2 suitcases. "I hear you were looking for a live-in nanny," Maria said, her lips curling into a smile. "Well, cancel the ad. You just found one." I stood frozen, unable to process. What's going on?" "Don't just stand there. Go help Louie with my other bags," Maria commanded smoothly. I followed Lou to the car, and we brought in 4 more suitcases. As soon as I shut the door, I found Maria in the den, playing with the twins. They were laughing, rolling on the floor, and tugging on her long, dark hair. "Have these boys eaten lunch yet?" she asked. "No. "Well, you take over, and I'll find them something," she said, her voice calm. And just like that, Maria became a part of our life. That first night, she moved into my bedroom. The next morning, she took everything that had belonged to Sue. Her clothes, pictures, makeup, everything. She packed it into garbage bags called Goodwill and had them haul it away. While the boys napped, we sat at the table. I tried to speak, but the words stuck in my throat. "Go on, Robert," Maria urged, her voice smooth as silk. "Let's get it over with. Ask me whatever you need to know. How had things gotten so complicated? How had I ended up here?" But now, there was no turning back.